Mhm. All right, go lay down. All right, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight, taking time out of your busy schedule. All right, we're going to get started here. Hi, my name is Donna Heitmanick, and I am going to be hosting tonight. Give me a second here. I have to find my notes. All right. I want to thank you for being here tonight to hear our series From Theory to Practice, The Possibilities with Linguistic Phonics. My name's Donna Heitmanick, and I'll be moderating tonight's event. Some housekeeping, please stay muted. It's really important that you stay muted because this is a webinar and this is a meeting and not a webinar, so you will be heard. If you have a question, post it in the chat. If you want your question directed to a certain person, please name them. And actually, I think we have a document that you can put your question in. Is that correct, Nora?
No, if they put their question in the chat, I'm going to put it in the document for you to.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
A little confused on that. Tonight we have 3 teachers that have experienced a shift in their teaching by using a new approach, often referred to as linguistic phonics. You might even hear it as structured linguistic literacy or speech to print. Our first speaker is Stephanie Bolton. Please correct me if I said your name incorrectly. Are we good?
That's correct.
Perfect. And she is a national board certified teacher with over 2 decades of experience in early childhood education and literacy. Stephanie currently teaches first grade in Alabama. Stephanie holds a Bachelor's of Science, a Master's of Arts, and an education specialist degree in elementary education, as well as a certification in instructional leadership. She was part of the first cohort of Alabama educators trained in the language essentials of teachers of reading and spelling, which is often referred to as letters, and has earned mastery certifications in both letters, elementary, and early childhood. In the summer of 2024, Stephanie discovered evidence-based literacy instruction, or EBLI, which is known as. The training she completed was transformational, fundamentally shifting her understanding and approach to teaching reading, spelling, and writing using an integrated speech-to-print methodology. Inspired by the remarkable growth she's seen through EBLI, Stephanie opened a private learning center to support students across her community in building foundational literacy skills and confidence. She currently serves as the Goyan Literacy Fellow, sharing and advancing evidence-based literacy practices with educators nationwide. She remains committed to continually expanding her knowledge and refining her practice to better meet the needs of every learner. All right, Stephanie, it's all yours. Thank you.
Well,
Right.
I'm going to do, Stephanie, do you want me to put the slide up for you to look at? Yeah, I'll share
That would
my
be
screen.
wonderful.
I'll share my screen, and that way I could present here and you can use that to help you. All right, here it is. You said, okay, everything's good?
Yes, looks good.
Take it away.
All right, thank you. First of all, it's an honor to be here tonight, and I'm excited to share my journey with EBLI that happened last year and continues to this day. So I'm going to tell the journey of last year's class. Really, I had 19 first graders last year. And when they started the year, there was a wide range of abilities.
Check that ball up.
Some students were, average for
bad.
coming in, but I had some that were reading as few as 3 words a minute. And then I had some that were reading over 100 words a minute and were reading chapter books already. And so I had a very wide range of readers to reach. And I had discovered EBLI in July of that summer and decided to give that a try. It was something completely novel to me. I had been using structured literacy before. So I'm going to go through 3 shifts or differences that happened last year when I used evidence-based literacy instruction, or EBLI, and tell you about how that transformed the culture in my classroom and the results that I saw in my students. So the first shift that I want to talk about is skill integration. So before EBLI, I feel like my instruction had become a little bit fragmented. I had a core reading program, which was open court, but I knew all of these other things that needed to happen that were all good practices that I didn't feel like were covered in that core program. So I was supplementing a lot. I had a different program for phonemic awareness. I had a different program to pull in more morphology. So I kept trying to fill gaps in my program with other reputable products and programs. But in the course of that, it just became a little overwhelming for me. And I'm sure it was overwhelming to my students as well. So the big shift in that is that after EBLI, there's just not that overwhelm anymore. There's basically a menu of activities, and all of the activities in EBLI focus on building students' knowledge of how our written language works. So they're based on these 3 core things that do not change. There are no exceptions to these rules. We can learn them and apply them across the board. So that is that a spelling of each sound in our language can be, well, let me rephrase that. You can use 1, 2, 3, or 4 letters to spell every sound, and that never changes. So there are no rule breakers. That is just a fact that stays the same. Each sound can be spelled many ways. And then also some spellings can represent more than one sound. These 3 things are true, no matter what. So you don't have to learn them and unlearn them or learn exceptions to those. And every activity that I use with EBLI covers 4 to 8 of the essential literacy components. And what I mean by that is the 5 components that were listed by the National Reading Panel, which are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, and also handwriting, spelling, and writing. So every single activity that I teach using evidence-based literacy instruction integrates at least 4 of those. So there's no more silos of instruction of 10 minutes of phonemic awareness where we're just working on phonemic awareness. We don't have to do that anymore because we're always doing phonemic awareness through every activity. So for example, there's one activity where we work on multisyllable sound lines. That single activity includes phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, and spelling. And so it makes a much more efficient use of my time without it seeming so fragmented. It makes more sense to me. It makes more sense to my students. I'm thinking of the activity where we're summarizing after we've read something. That activity actually hits all 8 of those areas in one single activity. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck with that. So every minute, once I started using EBLI, every minute is very purposeful, but it's also very connected. It makes sense and it's authentic. So the students really take to all of that. So I'm moving on now to shift number 2, which is pacing and flexibility. So it says on the slide here, planning is faster and more flexible, but I wanted to kind of go into that and explain why that's true. Before EBLI, planning took longer because, of course, I'm meshing different programs together and I'm doing my best to make it a cohesive whole where it does make sense, but that took a lot of time. I felt like I needed to follow this certain scope and sequence, and I felt like I needed to really control the text that I was putting in front of my students to align with that scope and sequence to set them up for success. So I was very cognizant of that. After EBLI, I have those key concepts in mind, those 3 things that never change. I have a menu of EBLI activities that I've acquired. I acquired that. It took me, a few months of my training to really get all of those activities under my belt. But once you have them, you can apply them throughout the year. And I was able to take those things and I can create authentic lessons that connect to what we're learning in science or social studies, or that connect to what students are interested in. And I can pull those lessons together, and those lessons are highly effective, efficient. I know the students are getting what they need with literacy, but it's so easy to integrate that and have some flexibility in the content that we're putting into the text. So that's where I get the flexibility. Also, the students start reading authentic text immediately. Now, that is with a lot of scaffolding and support, especially at the beginning of the year. And I do use decodable text. I don't want anyone to misunderstand that, because there is a place for those. But I don't hesitate to expand that. I'm not hesitant like I used to be. Like, are they ready for this? This has so many words that maybe we haven't covered those phonics skills yet. Because I know during the time when they're reading with me, I can provide the support they need in order to be successful with that. Also, the pacing within the lessons is just very efficient. Corrective feedback is given throughout the lesson. It's very interactive. So the students are constantly participating, because whoever's doing the segmenting, whoever's doing the blending, whoever's doing the writing or the reading, those are the people who are learning. And so every student is doing everything. Nobody has to wait for their turn to learn. Everybody is learning the whole time. So that is where shift number 2 comes into play. Shift number 3 is differentiation. So it says every learner is challenged and every learner feels successful. And that's what leads to every learner growing. So before Ebbly, I had basically my schedule dictated my small group. So there was a time on my schedule that was set aside for small group instruction. And then I had kind of a rotation of certain groups I would meet with on certain days, regardless of what I had observed in a whole group. Of course, I would try to tailor it to what I had seen, but I was going to meet with that group on that day, regardless. After Ebbly, the differentiation is embedded in the framework, so it's very organic. All learners are challenged during our whole group instruction, from the student who was reading 3 words a minute to the student who was reading 112 words a minute. They were both challenged, but they were both successful at the same time, because the supports were in place to help them be successful. So much of it is just based on cognitive science and managing their cognitive load, focusing on what they need to know to really become the best reader and writer and speller they can be. And the declarative knowledge that I have doesn't necessarily need to be shared with them, because that is what sometimes creates the cognitive overload, where there's too much going on, so therefore they don't really learn any of it well. So my whole group time is really maximized, and the small group time is very flexible. It depends on what I've observed during that lesson or the day before, because during that whole group lesson, I'm being diagnostic and prescriptive. I'm noticing what the students are doing. I'm seeing exactly which of those skills they're struggling with, and I know already which activity I can use to help support them in that small group setting. And sometimes it's simply needing more practice. So every student moves forward together, because kids as early as 1st grade, they pick up on which kids can do things and which kids aren't, and they develop these self-concepts very early. So I think it's very important that they all see themselves as capable of doing these challenging things, and also of being successful at that. So moving on now to the classroom culture and engagement. I've already touched on the engagement piece. We're 100% engaged. There's really not another option. And this isn't just during the literacy block. This is really any time during the school day we're reading and writing, whether it's in math or science or social studies, anytime. Even if I'm the one writing on the board, the students are saying the sounds for me as I write. So it is constant. So all of my students increased in confidence and curiosity. They all took more ownership of their learning. And really, they all developed such a joy and a love of reading, including my student who started at 3 words a minute. Now, she had some walls up when we started the year, and she was a little bit shut down. But by October, there was this pivotal moment for her, and I think for me too, where she looked up to me during a lesson and she was like, I told my mom last night, I love reading and writing now. And I was shocked to hear her say that. But she meant it with all her heart because she just came out and said it. I had not asked her anything about it. So that was telling me it was working. When the class would earn whole class rewards for something and I would get their input, well, what would we like to do since we reached our goal? A lot of times they were suggesting activities that were just straight Ebley activities that they wanted to do as their class reward because they didn't view them as, tedious or anything. They loved them and they loved learning more through that. And this one is very pivotal. The mistakes aren't just accepted. So before Ebley, I would say, and I think most teachers say, mistakes are okay. Everybody makes mistakes. It's okay. But after Ebley, I don't say that anymore. I say mistakes are expected. If you haven't made a mistake, then there's a very good chance I have not actually taught you anything new today because we are learning when we're making mistakes. And it took a few weeks for that to sink in. But even this year's class, they have fully embraced that now. And they still, of course, try their best, but they don't get upset when they make a mistake. In fact, if you listen to them, a lot of times you'll hear like gasp when I'll say, watch this. This is a 2-letter spelling for full. And, they're excited almost by that now because they know they're learning something. So the climate in the classroom is very safe. It's very productive. And they really are just having fun and enjoying it. Another thing that makes that so is the fact that a lot of times we're writing on whiteboards, so their mistakes don't feel permanent. It's very easy to correct those. And the last thing I'll touch on are the outcomes. The data really speaks for itself, and you can see that there on the slide. 37% at the beginning of the year on the iReady diagnostic were mid or above grade level. At the end of the year, it was 100% in the dark green. And that was remarkable. I had never seen that before in a class. The oral reading fluency, what was really encouraging about that was the growth was for the wide range of students I had. So the student who started at 3 words a minute with 43% accuracy grew to 46 words a minute with 100% accuracy. And then the student who started at 112 words a minute and was already very accurate at 97% grew to 154 words a minute with 99% accuracy in first grade. And by April, 100% of the class was reading chapter books, which was a huge deal because chapter books in first grade, that's where it's at. That's what they come into first grade with their mind on. So the fact that they all were able to get there and still have some time in first grade to enjoy that success was amazing. But aside from the data, really the biggest student outcome that I can speak to is their confidence, their independence, their pride. And what's amazing to me to see that I was actually teaching less. I was teaching fewer programs. I was teaching way fewer rules. And my students learned so much more because I was teaching it in a way that made sense to them. So they didn't just learn how to read last year. They really learned how to love reading. And I've seen that carry over even as I see them as second graders now. So it was really a remarkable journey. And I love kind of refining my practice this year. And it's just a lot of fun for me and my students. And what makes it, I guess, the most fun is seeing the growth. Every single day, you see the growth happening. So that is my story.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Is there anything else you want to add? Maybe later?
Of course, later, if there are some questions, I'd be happy to address any questions or discuss anything further. I love talking about the changes with Ebley.
It sounds amazing. And your kids sound really excited about reading. And what I love what you said, the love of reading, isn't that what we're wanting them to do?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
because when they feel that success, that makes them want to do it more.
Absolutely.
So it's a cycle.
And it's quite reinforcing for the teacher too. I might add. Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie. Our next speaker is Kim Fitzsimmons. Let me see if I can find her. Is she here?
I'm here.
There she is. Okay. Kim has been teaching for 19 years and is currently a first grade classroom teacher in New York. She was trained in foundations in 2012 and taught the program for 9 years in both kindergarten and first grade. She provided turnkey training for teachers in grades K through 2, helping them to learn and implement the program. In 2021, Kim was trained in SoundsRight and has taught using this method to both kindergarten and first grade for the past 4 years. All right. Kim, her PowerPoint is up, and here we go.
All right. Just to give you a little history, as you said, up until 5 years ago, we were using a program called Foundations. Our district was seeing that a majority of our students were not progressing out of the reading program. Our E&L students were not showing any real progress as well, so they decided to shift to a linguistic phonics approach called SoundsRight, which was new to the district, new to most pretty much anywhere. It had come from England. So we were a little bit nervous at first. But I would say within the first month, we were just absolutely blown away. And that's why I put my shift difference, my first key difference that I saw was student impact. Within the first month, our students were actually, with even the first week, our students were reading and writing. Prior to SoundsRight, we would have to teach the entire alphabet before our students could encode and decode words. And when you think about that, you've gone through all 26 letters, and then now we're going back and all of a sudden starting to, make CBC words. And a lot of the kids were getting stuck. They would have difficulty with the story. My E&L students, they're new to the language. You would have E-ed, and they would be very confused because they didn't know who Ed was, and they would see a man. So it just didn't quite make a connection with them and caused a lot of cognitive overload. Some of our other students that maybe have learning difficulties were also struggling as well. And we get a lot of confusion with C being, instead of the sound K, they would just say S instead.
Mhm.
But with this new program, the first week, we're doing the letters A-M-I-S-T. The students are encoding, they're decoding, they're playing phonic manipulation games. We could just see an incredible improvement. By the end of that year in kindergarten, our first year that we implemented it, out of 200 students, only 3 fell below grade level. And that was because 2 of them had severe learning disabilities, and the third one had just come in March from another country, didn't speak the language, and came from a very turbulent background. I had the honor of being able to move to first grade with that class, not all of them, but that one student in particular. And by the end of first grade, she was reading and comprehending and writing above grade level, far beyond even some of her other classmates. So we were just astonished by the entire program and have fallen in love with it ever since. We now teach it in K1, 2, and they're starting to move it into third grade. Increased engagement and improvement in their ability, as I said, to read, write, and to speak. The program allows you to integrate vocabulary, so we're able to differentiate. We can choose our own words. We're not stuck with a list of words that we were given before. So I can differentiate if in kindergarten we're doing the sound for the letter W, I can have win for my students that maybe need CBC. I can do 12 for those students that I want to push, and then just went for those students that are, sort of in the middle. It allows me that flexibility to differentiate and tailor my lessons to meet all of my students' needs, even in a whole group setting. So everybody feels like they're part of what's happening and nobody feels left out. Sorry, somebody's popped up, so I just looked. I'm also a little bit nervous. Sorry, everyone. Skill integration, SoundsRight meets all the needs that are 6 shifts for New York. We have our phonemic awareness. We have our phonics, our vocabulary. As I said, we can tie in math, language, trapezoid, into our phonics lessons. So it allows that flexibility to pull in science and social studies words. and the children are just 100% engaged. Like Stephanie said, we also write on whiteboards, so it's not like there's a permanent error. They're very comfortable with understanding that a letter represents a sound, that sounds can be represented in 1, 2, or 3 or 4 spellings, that a sound could be spelled in more than one way, and that many spellings represent more than one sound. So with that, when we sit down to read a book, if a child comes across a word that has an EA spelling, they don't think that they've broken a rule. And for those higher students, they're trying the different sounds. They're saying E, and A, trying to blend the word to see what works best. If it's a student that still struggles to hold on to that, they're comfortable with just saying, Mrs. Fitzsimmons, in this word, is the EA saying or is it saying E? And if I say, oh, well, there's actually a new way, they're very comfortable with that as well. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit nervous. My mouth is dry. Just going to take a sip of water. The Sounds Right program has been fantastic. Thank you for the heart, because it does relieve the students with that cognitive overload, and they are very comfortable with not, if they don't know something, they're very comfortable with asking. When it comes to writing, when students are spelling words, they'll raise their hand and just say, Miss Fitzsimmons, in the word play, what's the spelling of A? For those for my higher students, I'll say, well, where are you hearing it in the word? I hear it at the end. What would be the best, if you had to choose between the 4 spellings of A, which would be your best choice? And they say AY. So overall, as a district, our students are scoring higher. We have less students who require reading services. Another plus that I forgot to mention was that we have streamlined our programs. So it's not like the children are getting foundations in the classroom, but then going to the reading teacher and getting Morton Gilliam. The entire school is teaching Sounds Right. So when my children are in my classroom, they know the routines for the lessons that I'm giving. And then when they go to the reading teacher, they don't have to learn a new lesson. It's the same script as though I would be saying. So they're very, relaxed and comfortable. They don't need to learn a new procedure. They don't need to learn something new. And they know there's no rules, because as you know, in English, there aren't any real rules. So they just call them generalizations. And if by mistake, once in a while, if I'm teaching and I'll say, well, what's the rule? And they'll all chime in and say, oh, no, Miss Fitzsimmons, there is no rules. Remember, just generalizations. And I'm like, oh, yes, you're right. So they love even correcting me. We have various word walls within the classroom. And, if we're putting up communicative property, the children love to try and sound it out beforehand, and they're figuring it out. So we've just noticed that emotionally, our students feel better about themselves in reading. Nobody, there's no exception to the rules, so nobody feels like they're doing anything wrong. They're very open and welcome to the fact that letters can be represented by more than one sound. They're comfortable with doing it. We also do decodables, but by January, most of our students will be able to take books off of the shelf and read them because they have enough of the code in first grade so that they can move on. Just to familiarize you with a little bit of first grade. In first grade, our first unit is the 4 sounds, the 4 spellings, I apologize, of A. We do that for 2 weeks. And then the second week, we go into the 4 spellings of the sound for E, and then we continue. So by the time we get to the end of the year, the children have pretty much learned 90% of the code. And in second grade, they're reviewing what code they've already learned and adding a few extra spellings. And I think that's it. I'm not sure if I forgot anything, but if you have any questions, because I was nervous, I apologize. I'm welcome to answer anything.
Kim, you did great. No need to be
Thanks.
nervous. We're all in the same boat.
Stephanie was absolutely fantastic, and Evely, I just learned so much. So thank you, Stephanie.
I know we're a learning community. That's why we're here. All right. So our last speaker, thanks, Kim. Our last speaker is Bonnie. She was having issues, but guess what? Not anymore. So she's on, ready to go. Bonnie Oh, I got to turn this paper over. Sorry. Bonnie Delamat is a veteran educator with over 3 decades of experience in K-8 and higher education, who recently adopted the Reading Simplified method just last year. Besides serving as a professor at Eastern New Mexico University Roswell for 13 years, she has led district-wide initiatives to improve literacy outcomes as well as technology delivery across diverse student populations. Now based in Colorado, she teaches first grade at Belo Romero Academy of Applied Technology and serves on the Positive Behavior Intervention System Committee. All right.
Hi. Well, I have a tough act to follow. Both of you did a wonderful job, so thank you. Yes, so I did teach in New Mexico for 25 years. And when I first started teaching at the school, I ended up being at the entire time. It was a Title I school. We had 100% free lunch, and we had most of our students were English language learners and came from mostly very low economic, poverty-stricken homes. And so they came in not really prepared, not really having that language-rich environment that some of our kids start out in kindergarten, first grade. And so I was very fortunate because I taught with some amazing teachers. And because our school did so well, we created our own curriculum. And so the veteran teachers that I got to learn from talked a lot about the science of reading before it was really a thing. And so we were able to do that for a time. And then, we would have a new group of administrators that would come in from the district level, and they would have their programs that would come in. And so because I got to see how reading instruction was supposed to look, I really was able to see when these new programs would come in, how flawed they were, or how there were some big missing components as far as like building that foundation. And so I was always supplementing. We would have we had a program from Houghton Mifflin. I had to supplement. We had a program from Pearson. I had to supplement. We had, what else did we have? We had one that was called, what was it called? I can't even remember now because it's been so long, but it was when Dibbles started, and it went along with that. And there was no writing or comprehension at all, so I had to supplement. So I went through that for a long period of time, just having to supplement that reading instruction. And then I moved to Colorado. This is my 4th year here. And we were doing reading mastery. And when I first saw it, I was like, wow, I remember reading mastery when I first started teaching. I saw it. And then I found out we were using the same version of reading mastery as they had been using 25 years ago. So again, there were a lot of supplements that I had to put in to make my reading program work. And so then we adopted EL, and it has 3 different components, but we use 2 in our district. And one is called modules, and that is just mostly about literacy, but the literature is, I teach first grade, and most of the literature we have is like 4th grade level, 5th grade level, which is fine for enjoying stories, but not when they would have to try to write about that. And then there was no real writing instruction, and then the skills block was kind of limited. So last year, right before school started, we brought Reading Simplified into our school. And when I say right before school started, I was still training, watching the training videos for the first few weeks of school, trying to get myself ready to teach. And so once that was implemented, I mean, I was like putting out everything I could as soon as I had it completed. And what I noticed right away is we were using those same methods as when I first started teaching. We finally got back to good teaching, and it hit so many different things that kids need, like writing and phonics and phonemic awareness and blending and segmenting. And so immediately I just started seeing growth in my targeted intervention group. So at my school, we have targeted intervention. So I have like the middle group. There's 2 or 3 groups below me, a couple of groups ahead of me. And so my kids started making so much progress that they were just moving out of my group really quickly. And so my classroom as a whole, again, tons of growth right away. At my school that I'm at right now, like the school I was at before, where I had so many English language learners, most of those students' native language was Spanish. Here at the school I'm at now, we have students from Africa. We have students from South America. We have students from Mexico. So there's lots of different languages that they're learning. And so just having this program in our school has really made a difference for those English language learners as well. Let's see, we still have some reading mastery. We have SIPs that we were using last year. I wasn't really crazy about either one, so I was really happy that this came along. And so the first difference for me was student growth. So DIBELS, for those of you who are not familiar with DIBELS, it's our assessment program that we do at the beginning, middle, and end of the year. And then you do what's called progress monitoring in between those assessments. And so for students that are intensive, they're not, they're a little bit, they're well below the benchmark. They're called intensive and they're red, they're color-coded red. And then you have students who are strategic and they're nearing the benchmark, but not there yet. And then your students who have hit the benchmark they're just called benchmark and they're green. And then you have students above that are blue. And so at the beginning of the year, almost all of my students were red. And so by the end of the year, I only had one student that was red. She was also one of my English language learners. She was from Asia and there was no English spoken at home. And she was being tested for some learning disabilities as well. So she made a tremendous amount of growth, but she just didn't hit that benchmark yet. And then I had 2 students that were almost at benchmark, but every other student in my class, and it was a class of 24, were at grade level or above by the end of the year. So that was very exciting. And I know the difference was reading simplified, because what we were doing in EL was not making that kind of difference, because the year before I just didn't see that. And the second shift that I saw was increase in practice. This summer, I was on a committee that looked at our testing data. So my school is a K-8 school. So in 3rd grade, they take the CMAS. So we looked at CMAS scores, and then we also looked at our DIBELS data and our math data for K1 and 2. And if you look at the reading data for K1 and 2 and the CMAS scores for grades 3 through 8, there were 2 areas that we were low. One was reading and one was writing. And so when you look at the programs that we had adopted, there was no reading fluency practice and there was no writing practice. And even if there was a little bit, there wasn't enough. I'm looking at a question. We meet with our group of students every day for an hour for our intervention time. So what I love about Reading Simplified is they come into my room and we do some sort of reading fluency activity. And so we really break down those words and then we start practicing reading it fluently. And then we do an activity called Switch It. And so what they do is they have like this board that folds. It's like a trifold, and they have all of the letters or phonemes. They have just the single letters on one side, and on the other side they have the digraphs and the R control vowels and all those things on the other side. And then I give them a list of the letter tiles they're going to need, and they're Velcroed, so that's really nice. I had done an activity back almost 30 years ago that was similar, called Making Words. But this is so much better because There's Velcro. They can Velcro those right onto their board. I mean, 6-year-olds have a hard enough time keeping organized. So just having it on the board like that, and then they have a space at the bottom where they actually make the words. And ideally, you would want to do this with a smaller group. My group right now is 24, and it works. It works for us. And so that's really exciting, because what I do is I put my board on the document camera when we're putting the letters on, just so they can double check to make sure that they have the letters they need. And then we go through and we start making those words. And so like if the first word was big, they would bring those tiles down onto their Velcro. And as they're bringing them down, what I typically do is say, okay, our first word is big. Let's tap that out. Big. And then we tap it out onto our board where those sounds are going to go. Big. And then as they're bringing them down, they sound them out. Big. And then we change that word. I say, okay, so now we're going to change big into dig. Now remember, you're only going to change one tile. So they really focus on which sound they need to change. And I can hear them because I walk around as they're building it. I can hear them doing it, and they're making those words. And then it really makes it easy for me to figure out if they're having difficulty, where it is. If it's the initial consonant, if it's that medial vowel, if it's the final consonant, it's great. So then after that, we do either a sorted activity. So they're like, say our first beginning of the year, we did short vowels, and then we went into our long vowels, and our first one was long O. So we talked about all the different spellings of long O. And she need, like, we would go and make those on our, we had like a sorted activity where they'd have columns for each spelling of long O. And then we would look at a reading passage and we would figure out where those words fit. And so it would reinforce that, oh, it's O consonant E, oh, it's OA. And the kids really got proficient at that too. And so while we're doing that, when we got into the long vowels, because what happens in first grade a lot is when you start teaching those long vowels, the kids forget that those vowels still have a short sound. So because we're still doing switch it, we're still reinforcing the short vowels, but we're also teaching them the long vowel sounds as well. And then we go into an activity called Write It. And so I'll dictate some things for them, and we'll start breaking down what is a sentence, you know, as we're writing it together, the reinforced capitalization, reinforced punctuation, all of that gets addressed. So again, we are reading more, we are writing more. And I really believe, because now this is just barely our second year into doing this practice, I really think it's going to make a big difference on everybody's scores and not just what I've seen in my own classroom. So my third shift is, like I've kind of already mentioned this, writing is built in. I can't tell you, I would tell you 27 years of teaching, that's a long time. I really have never liked a writing program that's been in our curriculum. I've always thought it was, it's okay. It's not great. The kids don't love it. And so I would always have to supplement. And now we're writing sentences and the kids are feeling confident. Like one of the things that we had to do about a month ago is we had to identify students that we could move up to their next testing level. And so you had to kind of make a commitment. And so I made commitments for quite a few students, and I already hit my goal for that. And so we have a consultant that comes to our PLCs, and she asked me, she said, how did you do it? How did you get all of your kids to move up? And I said, I sold it. I sold it, you know. Education is a marketing program too, because if your kids don't buy into it, they're not going to do it. And so you really want them to be motivated and enjoy what they're doing, and then the success is going to come. And so I know the other two presenters have touched on that as well. When you have the motivation piece, it's the kids feel good about what they're doing, they're enjoying what they do, and because of that, they're seeing success.
Talking about neurological disorder.
So my classroom culture and engagement, I said students are met where they are, so they become engaged easily and they enjoy the decodable stories. The informational texts that are included in Reading Simplified are great because we did one on Abraham Lincoln. So then they had a million questions on Abraham Lincoln. So I put in a little lesson about Abraham Lincoln. And then we had another one on Martin Luther King Jr. And they were super curious about that. And so we added a piece of that to our lesson. And so the next day when we weren't doing informational text, they're like, well, why aren't we learning about someone today? And I said, well, somebody else will come along, but we're just going to do a different kind of reading today. So that's been great. My student outcomes, like I said, we've had well above average growth, and we're getting to the point, you know, my goal this year is to not have anyone intensive. And that's going to be a really big goal for me because we have at our school, well, in our district, we have what's called a co-teaching program. And so what they do is they take our CLD teachers and our special education teachers and they plug them into classrooms at certain periods of the day. So I have all the IEPs in my classroom. So one of the other classrooms has a few and the other two classrooms have no IEPs at all. So I have some children with some very intense needs, but even they are making a lot of progress. So again, my goal is to get everybody out of that red or as close to being out of red as possible.
You're still muted, Donna.
So you just saw my mouth moving, huh? Okay, so what we're going to do is move on to our Q&A, and if you continue to have any questions, please put them in the chat. We have someone monitoring the chat, and I will move on and find the questions. First question. I think, Stephanie, did you answer this? Did you take EBLI intervention or first grade training?
I started with the first grade training, and then when I saw how successful it was in my classroom, I actually sought out a fourth grader who I had had a few years before that I knew had lots of intervention without much progress, and asked if I could start working with her during some of my planning time. And when that was approved, I added on the intervention training. So I've actually done both at this point.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, here's a question. How do these programs function for severe dyslexia and dysgraphia? More repetition, more connected text, any other changes needed? How do these programs function for, oh, it's the same question, sorry. All right. And if you ask this question and want to share who you are and your concerns, you may do so also. Does anyone want that question?
Could I try to tackle that question?
You bet.
So last year I had a student with dysgraphia, and I had a separate student that had dyslexia in reference to reading. And I also had a student who had surface level dyslexia, they were classified as. The Sounds Right program is so embedded in focusing on the sounds. So if we're learning the 4 sounds of A, the students are writing the words on their whiteboards. They're saying the sounds as they're writing the words. They're, again, going over it, pointed to the sounds and saying them as they do it, underlining the sound once again. So I believe with all of that repetition and no real rules, so to speak, there is no long A or short A. Because, when you think about it, and especially with my E&L students, A and A can seem long or short. They're really unable to hear the difference with it. So I think freeing the students up from having those rules and giving them that understanding that these are, sounds are represented by letters, and these are the sounds that we're learning this week. And then being able to cyclically teach the program. So our lessons consist of 3 lessons. So the first lesson is a review lesson on where I'm seeing maybe a lot of my students are having difficulty. Then we have our core lesson for what we're teaching that week. And then we have a review lesson, and it might be with polysyllabic words, but I'm choosing sounds from a prior unit. Then we have our decodable text that ties in. And then if that student's ready, they're also grabbing something right off the library bookshelf. I think with all of those things combined and the consistency and the routine of the program, we've freed them of the cognitive load of having to understand what's happening in the reading room as opposed to what's happening in my room. They're ready. They know the routine when they sit down. They expect what's going to be happening. So that frees them up to the learning of whatever it is that I'm teaching them at that time. Whether it's the sounds of A, E, like I said. So I think when you have those things combined, I think that's really what helps it, right? Because you're never going to cure somebody of dyslexia. It's not a curable disease. But with the structure and the release of some of that cognitive overload and the consistency through seeing me and the reading teacher year after year, I personally have seen a tremendous difference. I had a student who, even over the summer when we were tutoring, she had Orton Gillingham during the year and wasn't seeing any progress. And one time I saw her in the library with her tutor doing Orton Gillingham, and every time she'd come across something, the tutor would say, "Oh, wait, that's an exception to the rule. That's an exception to the rule." And, that affects someone's emotional well-being and what they think about themselves as a reader. So it's not even just what I'm teaching you, but if you're not motivated because you don't feel you're good enough, and every time you try something, there's an exception to the rule, they're getting down on themselves. Their self-confidence is just, being crushed, and that is affecting them as well. So I tutored her and started with the Sounds Right program, the first grade level. We started with the 4 sounds of A. We did that for 2 weeks. We moved on to the sounds of E and continued to progress through it. And she was reading 3rd grade level text. She was in 4th grade, but her improvement was just tremendous. She was able to chunk a section of the text and tell me what it was that she had read. Her accuracy was improving. Her fluency was a little bit slow, but her accuracy was 99%. And, we can forego that a little bit, right? The fluency, if we know that we are saying the sounds and reading the words correctly. And then there was her self-esteem. Knowing that having to say the sounds and read the word is something that every great reader does. Me being the teacher, if I grabbed a book about quantum physics, I'm going to have to say the sounds and read the words because I don't know them. I'm going to have to break it apart into syllables. So
True enough.
that understanding gave her more self-confidence, which also affected her reading. So I've seen
Thanks.
tremendous progress with both, and E&L too. So
Stephanie or Bonnie, do you have any input on the question, which was how do these programs function for severe dyslexia and dysgraphia?
Sure. I would just add on to what Kim said, that I feel like it's designed, all of these programs are designed around how the brain naturally learns how to process language, which is starting with speech. So starting with that speech and mapping the print onto it is what sets these programs apart. And I also think it's important to note that the approach may be different, but it's still very explicit. It's still very systematic. It builds. And also it's multisensory because the students are constantly saying the sounds. They're hearing the sounds as they're writing the sounds. And so I think those are some other components that make it very productive for students who have a dyslexia or dysgraphia. The corrective feedback, like when we're practicing our handwriting, that kind of thing is very succinct. And it's also done in an encouraging way. And it's like Kim said, I think that can't be underestimated. Over the summer when I was working with students who are diagnosed or clearly struggling significantly, I had many parents tell me that their kids never dreaded coming to do these types of lessons because they feel the success, they feel themselves getting better. And they were the expectations are high. You believe they can do it, you set them up for success and give the support they need in order to feel that success. So it just reinforces it. So I've seen great success with students of all levels.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one little thing to add. So, like I mentioned earlier, I have all of the IEPs in my classroom, and I will tell you, I have so many students that began the year where they could barely speak. Just even having a conversation was difficult. So they have severe speech needs, but then also they couldn't write their name. They couldn't copy things from the board. It was a really, and this was just, we're October now, this was just August. And I will tell you, I've seen tremendous growth. I have one student, of course, his name's Christopher. Let's give him a very long name. He couldn't speak very well. He couldn't write at all. He couldn't copy at all. And now he can write. And I asked him one day, I said, does anybody ever call you Chris? Because I'm thinking maybe we can shorten your name a little. Nope, we all go, I only am called Christopher. He can write Christopher now. And he is actually in my group now for reading intervention. And he was in the lowest group. So again, just doing this daily practice that we're doing every day, where we're reading, we're building words, we're breaking words apart, we're writing. It's, and some of my students don't have a specific diagnosis like dyslexia or dysgraphia, but there are signs. They're 6 right now, so they haven't had a lot of, diagnosing. So, but I would say that probably that's the case for several of my students, and I've already seen a big difference. So I wish I had brought writing samples because I would show you. It's pretty amazing.
That's wonderful. Okay, let's go to Bonnie, this is for you. How often did you meet with each group? I think you said it was daily?
Yes, we meet every day for an hour.
Oh, for an hour. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how large is your group?
Well, my group is the largest group. I have 24. I did have 17. And then last Thursday we met to sort of shift the kids around because of their progress monitoring data. And so we were sitting there and everybody was like, I think that this person needs to be in Bonnie's group. And I think this person needs to be in Bonnie's group. And after a while, I was like, how big are we going to let my group get? And so right now I have 24. So again, ideally you would be working with a group of 6 or smaller, but I've made it work with 24. And, you just have to have some, you have to make sure that the procedures are in place and that kids understand what they are, and then just have a way to really be able to monitor that. And I have to say, so far, it's going really well.
Excellent. Okay, let's see. We have some questions that are maybe comments. I do have one that is a question about particular students, and I think because you guys are all experts on this, you might want to weigh in on this. There's a member here tonight who has 2 students who refuse to say the sounds aloud. They think they're too cool to do that. They only want to say the whole word. On the other hand, I have another student who won't or can't stop sounding out every word. Any pointers?
Well, for the one that sounds everything out, have you tried like continuous blending? Because that would be, instead of saying like d, g, you would go dog. That's been a way that I've seen people try that helps them build that bridge from sounding each sound out to actually blending those sounds together.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Any others?
I was just going to say, I think it's kind of hard to answer that question not knowing the students. I'm thinking of your students that were saying they're too cool, without having a connection to those kids and an understanding of who they are. I think it's kind of hard to comment on what you could do to change that that thought process in the child? It's a
Um,
hard question to answer.
it is a hard question to answer. Now, I know Nora uses the points game, and that kind of incorporates lack of cooperation or if they're speaking out of turn, but you could implement it for them not saying the whole word, giving them the points game. Um, I don't know if Nora, do you want to respond on that?
Sure. I can talk about that. Yeah, this is very common because saying the sounds, especially in EBLI, and I think in all of our programs talking here, that saying the sounds as you write is a tremendously integral part of. I just did a whole diatribe on our Facebook page about this, about how don't let them get out of the first session with you, ideally, especially if you're working one-on-one. In a whole class, it's a little different, but without being able to say the sounds as they write. And when I think that what's really important is telling them what's in it for them. So what's in it for them is you're going to be a faster reader, you're going to be a better speller, your homework's going to go faster, you're going to be, everything's going to be so much easier. And this is really critical. And let me show you. So we start right out of the bat with the very first thing that we do, that this is what I model. I think modeling is really important, where you show that and also admit, this was not, I was a great reader and a great speller before I even learned this stuff. And I was 36 years old at the point, and it's awkward at first. So it's awkward for me. And I think being honest with your students about that. However, still a whole lot of years later, whenever I come across a word that I'm unsure of, especially if I'm spelling a word that's 3, 4, 5 syllables long, I'm going to say the sounds as I write. This is something that you're going to use for your whole life. So it's absolutely not baby. I've taught doctors and lawyers, and I tell these kids all the time, and they improve their reading speed, their comprehension, all their things. So this is a really big gift to them. So I do tell them that. The point game is just a little tally where I use it to really bring into the consciousness of any learner, like, please do this. So they say the sounds they write. I might give them 100 points for saying the sounds for each sound in one word or whatever. And for some reason, it works well with kindergartners, first graders, 50-year-olds. I don't know why, but there's something about this motivation and bringing it into their consciousness. So doing that in a way that's fun and respectful. And I really work, once in a while, I'll get a few points, not too often though, but I really want to give them points, catching them doing what they're supposed to be doing instead of using it as a, reward punishment, especially not punishment type of thing. So
Right.
because then they'd be like, oh, wait a minute, let me try that again and say those sounds. So it's just a habit. It's like any kind of habit that we have to create. It's not something that we do natural as humans. So we've got to teach them how to do it. We've got to show them how to do it. Modeling helps, and the point game does help too, I find.
Good answer, Nora. All right, next question. Will this work for upper elementary as an intervention for students who have decoding and encoding deficits? Open for anyone to take those on.
I know in my school district, we do use Sounds Right as an intervention program for 4th and 5th grade, and they've even used it in the high school and the junior high school. And it has worked and they've seen improvements with the children's encoding and decoding. It is part of all the lesson. That's, what they're doing the entire time. They are encoding and decoding as they're saying the sounds and writing the words, starting from the extended code on, and they've only seen improvements. But then again, like I said, across the district, that's what we're using. So it's consistent amongst everywhere. But, you see for high school students as well.
And I would just add in, I did work with the 4th grader last year. And so she was only getting this with me for a shorter amount of time, 4 days a week. And she made tremendous growth. I work with her still this year. She continues to make growth. But on our state assessment, they get a score for their proficiency and also a score for their growth. And the year before in 3rd grade, the score ranges from 1 to 4, 4 being the best. And in 3rd grade, she had received a 1 for proficiency and a 1 for growth. And I started working with her in January, and it was somewhat inconsistent due to absences and scheduling. And the test is taken at the beginning of April, and her 4th grade scores came in. Her proficiency had gone up to a 2, so there was improvement, but her growth was a 4. So I think that speaks to how powerful it can be. And I found working with kids over the summer that the older kids almost can take to it faster, because they do have more background like to pull from. And so, I mean, I saw the kids I worked with over the summer in one-on-one sessions. I was astounded by how quickly they made the gains that they made. So I definitely think it works.
Actually, I'm the ENL and Gen Ed certified teacher. So I have ENL in my classroom, and you made me think about that as well. When our new students are coming in, whether they're elementary, junior high school, or high school, and they're new to the language, and we use the Sounds Right program to, give them the code, they show tremendous progress because it's kind of like you're giving them the secret to unlock what it is that they're trying to read. So the growth we see, a lot of the students are testing out of the program, which kind of makes us sad sometimes, but New York State requires them to still be part of the program for another 2 years. But a lot of us were like, wait, no, you're not ready to go yet, but it has shown tremendous growth.
Okay, how does linguistic phonics differ from UFly, which is what our district uses now? Anyone?
I would say UFly is a print to speech approach. And to be transparent, I was a little confused by this before I came to Ebley, because I actually stumbled upon Ebley on accident by signing up for a free structured linguistic literacy summit. And when I saw the title for that summit, I saw structured literacy and thought, oh, maybe I'll get 1 or 2 new ideas. And so I started joining that, and then had a total paradigm shift when I realized that I had not been doing speech to print. I really thought I had been. I had a sound wall up with all the mouth pictures, and I thought that was evidence that I was working on speech, and, speech to print was what I was doing. And so I think UFly is a good quality program if you're looking at print to speech. But I think speech to print is the game changer as far as accelerating your students' growth, helping it make more sense to them, reducing the cognitive overload, and just helping them reach their highest potential as readers and writers in the most efficient way possible. So UFly puts a lot of emphasis on the print first rules and those types of things that we've been talking about tonight.
Okay. Let's see. Can someone address what morphology instruction looks like in linguistic phonics?
I will speak just from my experience. It's always within authentic context of real words. So anytime we're reading words, we're discussing the vocabulary and the meaning, and we are pulling out those morphological pieces and discussing their meaning and how they affect the meaning of the word. So it's just always within context. Whereas in the past, I had a little 5-minute morphology routine, and we had one prefix of the week, and, we worked on that. Now, I can be intentional in the words I'm choosing to use in my lessons, and I can highlight certain morphemes when I need to, but it's all the time. Whenever we encounter them across the school day, we're pointing them out and discussing them in context.
I would agree with that 100%. And especially with all of the students that I have in my classroom that are learning English, I always say all of my kids are learning English, because even the kids who only speak English at 6-year-old, they're still learning English. And so it comes up in everything we do.
So you're
Our
saying
district has, oh, sorry. Our district
not a
has
very structured morphology lesson, but more as it comes along, which is fine. I mean, can be
I'm
done.
not too familiar with the program that my district is using on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade level. It's called Morpheme Magic, but I do know that it is a speech to print approach as well.
Okay. Here's a question. How is letter formation taught in speech to print programs? This poster says, my school uses handwriting without tears, which teaches letters in groups based on how they're formed. Sometimes I struggle with how to integrate handwriting with spelling and reading.
In my district, they've gone into the pre-Ks. So before coming into kindergarten, they've had a program similar to handwriting without tears. So they have that letter structure for those that come into kindergarten with not as much when they're using their whiteboards. As the teacher, you might take a green expo and you would form the letter with them so that they could trace it, or you would help them with the hand movement. But the first, it's AMIST, those are the first 5 letters. So as they're saying the sounds and they're writing it down, you're just supporting those students, who just might need a little bit support, but it's all done within the same time. There's no real separation.
I model it on, when we're doing Write It, I model a lot of handwriting during that time when we're figuring, when we're decoding those words before we're writing them. We talk about what each letter looks like in the space and where it starts. And I think that explicit instruction and just a lot of modeling and practice really helps.
Yes, and I agree with what both of these ladies said. It's just always, again, within meaningful context. In Ebley, we use something called the Peterson handwriting prompts, and they're very succinct. And so at the beginning of the year, especially as I'm writing on the board, I'll be saying those prompts, look around, tall down, and, and we also have a handwriting protocol that we use one-on-one with students that takes a few minutes. So it is explicitly taught, it is reinforced in meaningful context, and then we really focus on handwriting fluency and supporting students to attain a goal of being able to write 40 letters in a minute, because that has effects that are far-reaching as far as processing and reading and comprehension and all kinds of things. So we do focus on it, and the Peterson prompts are the prompts we use to help.
Thank you. All right. I think this might be our final question. Is there a video that I can see this modeled? And I'm assuming there's 3 different programs here. So ladies, can you share where you can find videos to view the programs that you have been trained in?
The Ebley website is amazing. It has tons of free webinars and information for anyone who is interested. I could still spend an entire weekend on that website myself, so I highly recommend visiting there.
Marnie, would you like to answer for me?
I just put it in chat. Thank you, Bonnie. We only have a handful of activities, and most of them are displayed on our most popular blog post, which I put into the link. And so you can see videos, get freebies, how to do it. We also have things all over the website, and we have a YouTube channel, but that would be the quick place to go for Reading Simplified.
Sounds Right has a website, and they do have some videos for parents or educators if they're interested. And I put the link in the chat.
I'm going to unmute because I'm trying to type this and I'm not typing fast enough. So I'll tell you, if you email us at info@ebley.com, we have videos of all of the activities that we teach in the sequence that we teach them to from beginning to end for our intervention for track 1, which is kindergarten, first grade, tracks 2 and 3, second grade and above, as well as classroom kindergarten for first K, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. So if you email us and let us know which grade level or if it's intervention or whatever, older kids, littler kids, or both, we can send you those videos. info@ebley.com. Thank you. Now I don't have to type all that.
All right, everyone. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and being part of this 3-part series. We do not have a date set for the next one, or maybe we do, and I just don't know about it. I think it might be in January, but I'm not positive. But No worries, because you know where to look for all this information, or it will be sent to you if you are on mailing lists. Thank you very much. We hope that you remain curious and find the success of these programs something that you might want to know more about. So you know where to go, and thank you for being here, and have a great evening.
Donna, I'm going to just really quickly share my screen for a second to
Sure.
just share the QR code at the very end here of the slides, which I didn't get to. Just give me a second. What's cool about this, once I get it up here, is you can scan it and then it brings you to a Canva page where you can kind of see sort of a summary of what these beautiful, wonderful presenters shared today. So it's kind of
Yay.
going to give you core shifts. It'll give you a little T-chart of I used to, now I, comparison of kind of what they did and now what they do instead, using a linguistic phonics approach. So that is there for just a second if you guys want to take a picture of that. And that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm going to leave this up for a few minutes and stop the recording. All right.